Robert Daly is director of the Wilson Center's Kissinger Institute on the United States and China. He joins us to discuss President Xi Jinping's upcoming visit to the United States, and always a pleasure. Nice to have you back here again in the seat, Robert.
Good to be back.
Let's just start with the sort of the basics, the logistics. What do we know about the president's itinerary and the agenda here with President Obama?
He will be going first to Seattle, and it is likely that he will give a policy address there in Seattle, which is interesting because a lot of his predecessors have given their major policy address in Washington. The fact that he's doing it out there suggests he thinks he'll get a friendlier reception on the West Coast than he will here. He will then be in Washington for 2 days, which will include the usual trappings of a state visit, but a great deal of time, many hours, one-on-one with President Obama as well. And then he's up to New York for the UN General Assembly meetings, where he'll be one of the world leaders who gives a major address.
Now, let's now talk about the context in which the trip is taking place. Suddenly, things have gone south in a dramatic way for the Chinese economy and the stock market in particular. Does this stock market crisis or this economic slowdown change at least the tone of the visit, if not the actual agenda?
I'm hoping that the slowdown, which I think is the correct word, not a meltdown, not a crisis, will change some of the atmospherics, particularly on the American side, and I think that it helps them. It helps them in that we have tended to buy into the Chinese myth of Xi Jinping as Superman, almost to buy into the cult of personality of which we've been credible, and to take his announcements as achievements, and to view the Communist Party under his leadership as sort of an omnicompetent juggernaut, and that has tended to increase our fears and therefore our own sense of crisis vis-a-vis China. Now we see Xi Jinping, he comes here, he's not hobbling in, but we see that they face major problems, which we knew all along, that they don't know how to manage many of them. They have made some major missteps, although they've recovered from a few of them on the economic front. And so I'm hoping that this will lower the temperature a little bit, lower the sense nearly of fear in the United States, and allow us to do what we should have done all along, which is to deal in a very workmanlike way with joint problems and to raise some of our concerns with China without fear that the door would be closed to discussion.
Is it almost counterintuitively in ways, perhaps a boost to U.S. confidence?
It can be a boost to U.S. confidence, and it might even take some of the wind out of China's sails in a way that works even in China. It's humbling, but it also works in China's interest. China has always played in its diplomacy a double game, which despite being a double game is nevertheless true, in that it sometimes wants to be treated as a major world power and to get credit for that, standing shoulder to shoulder with the United States and wanting respect when that suits its purposes. And then when it suits its purposes to be seen in other ways, we are but a poor developing country and we need special exceptions. Now, this isn't hypocritical. It's a description of China's true and largely unprecedented state of affairs. Right now we see that China, yes, is trying to restructure its economy. It's having a difficult time doing it. This has never been attempted before. They've had some major slip-ups, so maybe this can lower the temperature. We can get over our fears and worries about each other's intentions and get down to business, which again is what we need.
Much of the pre-trip reporting has focused on even reports out of China about dissension among the ranks growing, or at least opposition to Xi's agenda, and characterizing him as being bold, maybe biting off more than he can chew when it comes to his anti-corruption campaign and becoming the chief architect of economic policy. What can you tell us about that? Is it possible that this president is now facing a crisis of his own as far as his leadership and his agenda?
Well, I think crisis in leadership would be much too strong. Again, we tend to waver between extremes. Xi Jinping is either this new strongman Superman, or he suddenly failed and he knows nothing. And of course, the truth is somewhere in the middle. He faces,
as in most cases, right?
Right, he faces enormous challenges. And so we do see in Washington this tendency among much of the media and many of our politicians to catastrophize about China. And our job is to contextualize, to say, well, no, let's slow down just a minute. He's had some successes. He faces major resistance and daunting problems. And yes, there have been recent reports in the state-run media, two in particular, one that said the remnants of previous regimes, notably Jiang Zemin and the people that he put in place in his own patronage network, they've got to get out of the way, and past leaders have to stop interfering. You wouldn't put that in the paper unless you felt interference. And then secondly, last week, an editorial, which was also repeated on China Central Television, saying that the resistance to many of the economic reforms that Xi Jinping has proposed is outlandish and far exceeds what people know to be going on. So he's had 2 years. He came in very ambitious, very much as a strong man and sort of a man of the people, and he came in with this anti-corruption campaign, which has already taken in about 100,000 members of the Communist Party, so he's made some enemies, and now other shoes are starting to fall.
And it's moving higher up the food chain.
It's moving up higher up the food chain, and he's raised expectations, and now it's time to deliver on some of these promises, and that's hard.
Something that jumped out to me, the GDP grew 26-fold in 37 years in China. So the current group of leaders have been on a ride where it's holding on for dear life as the economy is growing at a rapid rate. Now they face something different in this slowdown. Are they equipped, both their experience and their orientation to the economy, to deal with the type of adjustments that might be necessary?
Well, the situation they face, like the rise they've been through, is unprecedented anywhere. So there's a sense in which nobody is equipped, and therefore there's a sense in which they're the best equipped because they've been along for the ride. Now, they do face a need to fundamentally restructure the Chinese economy. So the slowdown that we see, reflected both in what's going on in the stock market and reflected in their devaluation of the renminbi, this is in many ways expected. The announcements, the way it fell out, was rather sudden. But we knew that a slowdown was coming. We knew that a slowdown was necessary. In fact, Americans have been advising this for a long time. China has issues with signaling and PR and transparency at times, which can make you feel that you're in a sense of crisis, when in fact they're making moves that we knew were going to be difficult. Do they have the means? The answer is that we don't know, and you're asking the right question. They do have enough foreign exchange reserves, probably to ride out the difficulties they face over the next few years. They have the ability to recapitalize their banks. They have the ability to use some of their U.S. dollar reserves to buy renminbi to prop up the value of their currency when they want to do it. So because of their authoritarian governance and because of their forex reserves, they have means that we wouldn't necessarily have.
They have the
here.
levers and no obstacle in pulling the levers if they need to.
They can pull the levers, but it's again, they're not omnicompetent, and this is unprecedented stuff.
Final thought is on what would constitute a successful visit from the perspective of the Chinese?
From the perspective of the Chinese, I think really all they're looking for, especially given the difficulties Xi Jinping has faced, not only on the economic side and anti-corruption, but we had this recent explosion in the Binhai region of Tianjin, which has caused the Chinese people to be greatly concerned about China's development model and to once again be concerned about how safe they are and whether the government can keep them safe. So Xi Jinping comes here wanting to use this as an opportunity to shore up his constituencies and his reputation back home. It's usually the case when Chinese leaders come here that they're not really coming to talk to the American people. They are coming for optics back in China. That is going to be more than usually the case, I believe, with Xi Jinping's visit.
Well, thank you for joining us, and we'll look forward to debriefing after the visit.
Certainly.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Robert.